Welcome, my constant reader friends. I'm Tad, and this is Tad Reads Books and Stuff. All right, so today we're going to do a quick update, and then we are going to do a review of Night Shift by Stephen King. But let me get this reading update out of the way first. I did finish Oberon, which is the short story in Memories Legion, which goes along with Persepolis Rising, which was book 7. So I've got to do a video on this. I'm a little behind on my videos. I completed so many books right at the end of January. So I'll be doing a video on this soon. All right, got that. And then, of course, still Crooked Kingdom. If you watched my last video, I did finish this. I'm going to do a video on that as well. I'm going to incorporate Six of Crows. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Six of Crows because this is a duology by Leigh Bardugo. So that video will be coming soon. And I finished Night Shift by Stephen King. So this is a book we're going to talk about today. If you have been following me on my Discord channel, you'll see that I was updating just a couple snippets of what I was thinking as I was reading each story in this book. So I'm not going to go over everything in this book, but I'm going to hit on some points. But first, before we do that, next week we will be continuing my read-along with Graz on the GKBC for Saga, the next 6 episodes in Saga. And then this volume will be done. That's going to be next week. Also, I have started now in my... So, I'm calling this my Stephen King short story compilation reading project. Yeah, that's a mouthful. That's too much. If anybody out there could come up with something cooler to call this thing I'm doing this year with my Stephen King short stories, that'd be great. Maybe I could use that. I mean, sometimes it's cool to have a super long title or something and people are like, what the hell? So, but right now it's my Stephen King short story compilation reading project. So we've started this. I'm only about... what am I here? 30 pages in, 29 pages in. And the first story in this, of course, is Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. So that's my book for February. Also, I'm going to be, of course, reading this. Robert E. Howard, The Bron MacMorn, The Last King. I haven't started this yet. And to continue with my Expanse, Book 8, Tiamat's Wrath, Tiamat's, holy cow, Tiamat's Wrath. I can't talk for some reason. So book 8, and then of course the short story that goes with that. All right, so that's going to be this month. I haven't started that yet. Let's get into Night Shift. All right, so let's do the numbers first. Night Shift was originally published in September of 1978. I won't tell you how old I was in 1978. But I was pretty young. My version, this edition, has 336 pages. Now, on Goodreads, right now, currently, it has a 4.03 rating. I'll tell you, I gave it a 5. Not because it's the greatest book you'll ever read. A lot of it, though, is nostalgia for me. I did read it pretty much when it first came out. And it was like the second Stephen King book I read. I've talked about it before. Salem's Lot was the first Stephen King book I read when I was very young. This was the second one. Now, these are short stories that Stephen King published mostly in magazines. Mostly men's magazines. Playboy, Penthouse, Cavalier, back in the day. Now, these were published between 1968 and 1978, when this book was published in 1978. So there are a couple stories in here that were just for just published in Night Shift, but a majority of them were actually pre-published in magazines. Now, just for your reference, there's 20 stories in this book, and there's only 336 pages. The longest story is only 35 pages in this book, in this edition of this book. The shortest one, and I'm sorry, and the longest story is Jerusalem's Lot, which is the very first story in the book. Opens with Jerusalem's Lot. Awesome story. The shortest story in this book is only 7 pages, and it's The Man Who Loved Flowers. We're going to touch on this a little bit later. So, I don't know. I think that this is so many people, I'm jumping all over the place, I'm sorry. So many people ask me, Tad, where should I start? If I've never read Stephen King before, where should I start? What's a good representation? And I've seen people do videos on this and give varying different answers. I think the early works, for sure, you should start with. I think, there's nothing wrong with starting with Carrie, his very first published novel. Short, to the point, really good story. It can really, I think, get you into understanding what Stephen King is, even though, he's done some different works throughout the many years. But I think these short stories are good places too. If you are afraid, you see a lot of his novels now are really bloated, 600, 700 page books, and you don't really want to get into that, but you just want to read him. I don't think there's anything wrong with reading these short story compilations. Night Shift was the second book by Stephen King that I read. Jeez. And I loved it. Next was Skeleton Crew. Skeleton Crew, we'll be getting that soon, was awesome. So sometimes I'll just tell people, just read Night Shift. If you want a good idea of Stephen King and what he's doing, I think this is a great idea. Now, for sure, not every story in this book is great. I mean, geez, he started this in 1968, so he was still building his writing chops, for sure. So some of them aren't great, but for the most part, they pretty much are really good. There's 20 stories, like I said. What are my favorites? We'll get that out of the way first. Of course, Jerusalem's Lot. It opens up with a bang. That is a scary story. It's great. I like how he does the, kind of like the Dracula with the stories coming from letters and journals, that different people Jeez, I cannot speak today. That different people, wrote entries in their diaries or journals. I like how he pieces that together to tell this story. It was interesting. So yeah, great. It's the first story in the darn book, and it's awesome. Next, I love I Am the Doorway. I wrote on my Discord channel. That's a scary astronaut story. It's pretty cool. I always liked it. The imagery is really, really great for that story for me. The Mangler is a great story of a machine basically becoming possessed by a demon and wreaking havoc on the whole town eventually. Cool story. The Ledge, you gotta love The Ledge. Yeah, it's not very realistic, of course, but this is fiction, right? But geez, just could you imagine having to walk around a building on the ledge? Anytime I see that in anything I read or something I watch, like Blade Runner, when at the end Rutger Hauer's chasing him and he's hanging from the ledge, those always scare me. I love that story. And of course, Children of the Corn. The story is so much better than the movies. holy crap, it's gotten to the point now where a lot of people are liking these real cheesy movies by Stephen King because of the cheese. I don't like them at all. But the story is great. Also, The Last Rung on the Ladder. I got to tell you, it's my overall favorite story in this book. One of my favorite stories that he's ever written. It's not a overly long story, but man, it gets me every time in the feels. Very, very sad story. I could go on and talk. I could probably do a whole video on just that story. We're not going to. And then last but not least, one of my favorites is One for the Road. Now let me talk about One for the Road. This kind of drives me crazy. And now, I'm not an editor, a book editor, even though I play one on TV. Yeah, cheap joke. But One for the Road is a Jerusalem's Lot story. I think they missed the boat here. You open with a Jerusalem's Lot story. It would be so awesome if you closed with a Jerusalem Lot story, right? I think they missed the boat there. There's another story after it, and it's not good. It's a euthanasia story, The Woman in the Room. It's not one of my favorites. It's not horrible. It's not my least favorites, but I don't know why. Why would you miss that? Why? Okay, get off your horse, Tad. Whew. Let's talk about the weakest stories. Now, this is interesting to me. Might not be interesting to you, but to me, this is very interesting. My weakest stories are Night Surf. Night Surf is 9 pages long. Battleground. Battleground is 9 pages long. Strawberry Spring, you guessed it, 9 pages long. Lawnmower Man, 9 pages long. And last but not least, The Man Who Loved Flowers, 7 pages long. Now, I looked this up. The shortest story in the book is The Man Who Loved Flowers, 7 pages. The next 4 shortest stories are Night Shift, Battleground, Strawberry Springs, and Lawnmower Man, all coming in at 9 pages. What does that say? Does that say that somehow my brain, through reading through this book, got on this like train, this route, and whenever I hit a story that was very short, it kind of jerked me off the line, and so therefore I didn't like the stories? Or were these kind of like throwaway stories that he just threw in the book, added to the book to flesh it out and get it to be 336 pages? I don't know. They're the weakest stories, I feel. You may disagree with me. That's fine. But why are the 5 shortest stories in this whole book the 5 stories that I feel are the weakest? I think the plots are the weakest, the characterization's the weakest, the storytelling is the weakest for me. So I'm just curious. I mean, what do you all think? I mean, I did read a Goodreads review. It was a 1-star review. The girl said in this review that she didn't like it because there were too many stories in it, and she wished the book would have just focused on one. It's a short story compilation. That's what it is. But I can kind of see what she's saying. They're too short. They didn't have time to develop the plot or the characters enough for you to be invested in it. But that's one of the reasons why I feel that short stories are kind of a lost art. I don't see them as much from authors. I mean, look at Stephen King. He still does his short stories, but they're longer. We're going to be starting different seasons. Each one is over 100 pages long in that book. But a lot of these authors, I've noticed it, a trend. An author will release a book. Oftentimes it's a short book, 300 pages maybe, short to the point, great. And then they start getting bloated and bloated and bloated. I don't know if it's money because you get paid by the words. A lot of publishers pay by the word. I understand that. But I don't know. Sometimes these books get too bloated for me. I mean, they're still fun to read. I still like them, but I don't know. I still like the short story form of writing because you really got to be on your game and get your point in quickly. But then again, some people don't like that because there's no development of the characters, as much as a book. I understand. Again, Tad, get off your horse. But that's my take. So I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. Tell me what you think. Tell me, what did you like in this book? Tell me what you didn't like. That'd be cool. I want to hear what do you feel about it? I love it. I gave it 5 stars, but, mileage may vary. So anyways, guys, next month we're going to be moving on to different seasons in this series, and we'll keep going from there. Check me out on my Discord. I also am posting things on my Instagram channel. If you like any of this material, if there's any entertaining value, again, please like, subscribe, and leave me plenty of comments. I really love the comments. And as usual, peace out.